You've been disappearing for so long you don't even notice it anymore. Like fog creeping in slowly, you've been trained to vanish, trained to nod, to smile, to yield. Not because you're kind, but because somewhere along the way, you were convinced that survival meant being liked. But Carl Jung knew better. He knew that this isn't goodness, it's a performance, a costume stitched together with fear, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being alone. You tell yourself you're being nice, helpful, cooperative, but deep down, there's a quiet ache, a knowing that something in you is fading. Every yes you don't mean, every no you swallow carves out a piece of you, and no one sees it. No one even questions it, because you've taught them not to. You've taught the world that your boundaries are flexible, that your silence is consent, that your needs are negotiable. You didn't mean to do it, but every time you avoid discomfort, you choose disappearance over truth. Jung didn't see this as politeness, he saw it as shadow play. The pleaser isn't a saint. He's a mask, an adaptation, built to protect, but also to imprison, because the more you mold yourself to be acceptable, the further you drift from authenticity. The more you avoid friction, the more you bury the parts of you that want to push back, speak up, walk away. And the tragedy, those parts are your core. They're the pieces of you that remember who you are. And then comes the quiet breakdown. You wake up exhausted for no reason. You walk through life resentful, fake, worn thin from pretending to be okay. No one really knows you. Because how could they? You've spent years showing only the version of you that smiles through everything. But that version isn't you. It's your persona. A social costume trained by teachers, parents, culture, to perform, to adapt, and to obey. But masks crack. And when they do, you feel it. That hollow echo inside, that strange sense that your life belongs to someone else. That's not depression, that's your soul knocking. It's the parts of you that never got a voice, pounding on the walls of your personality, asking to be seen. And this is where the war begins, not with the world, but within. Because reclaiming yourself means disappointing people. It means saying no. It means standing still while others accuse you of changing, of being difficult, of losing your way. But that's not the truth. The truth is, you finally stopped performing. Jung would call this individuation. Not the glossy, feel-good journey of self-help, but the gritty, soul-wrenching process of becoming real, of uniting the pieces you've hidden, denied, repressed, of no longer asking for permission to exist. And yes, people will leave. They'll say you're not the same. They'll call you selfish. But they're not mourning the real you. They're mourning their access to your compliance. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. Because you were never meant to be a mirror for other people's comfort. You were meant to be a whole person, with a spine, with a voice, with a sacred no that doesn't need explanation. And once you live from that place, once your truth is louder than your fear, something changes. You stop chasing peace by pleasing and start creating it by being whole. And that is the moment you finally come home to yourself. You didn't come into this world trying to earn love. That wasn't your instinct, that was your training. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that in order to belong, you had to abandon parts of yourself. Be agreeable, be easy, be what they needed you to be. Not loud, not emotional, not needy, just helpful, just available, just nice. And the more you did it, the more you disappeared, slowly, quietly, completely. They said you were mature for staying quiet, generous for always putting others first, strong for swallowing your feelings. But none of it was true strength, it was survival. Because when you were young, saying no came with consequences. Speaking your truth brought rejection. Having needs made you feel like a burden, so you adapted. You put on a mask. You became the version of yourself that made everyone else comfortable. But deep down, a part of you started to dim. Carl Jung didn't call it people-pleasing. He called it betrayal of the self. Because that mask you wear, it isn't you. It's who you had to become to feel safe. It's functional, yes. Useful in school, in relationships, at work. It helps you move through the world. But over time, if you start mistaking that mask for your identity, you forget who you really are underneath. That's the danger. That's where the fracture begins. And that fracture is deep. It's not about being too nice. It's about losing touch with your own essence. You start wondering, who am I if I'm not the one everyone counts on? What happens if I stop performing, stop pleasing, stop saying yes when everything inside me screams no? Will they still love me? Will they still stay? These aren't just questions. They're fears rooted in the part of you that learned early on that approval equals safety. And so every time you prioritize being liked over being honest, you betray yourself again, piece by piece, smile by smile, until you're surrounded by people who love the version of you that doesn't even exist. But when you finally reach the edge, when you're too tired to keep pretending, something beautiful happens. The collapse is not a failure, it's a beginning. Jung called it individuation. Not becoming better, becoming whole, not becoming more likable, becoming more real. It's the moment you begin to reclaim all the parts of you that you buried. Your anger, your wants, your boundaries, your voice. You stop playing the role. You stop trying to be the peacekeeper. You realize you can love people and still choose yourself. You can want harmony, but not at the cost of your own truth. You can care deeply and still say no. That's not selfish. That's self-respect. That's maturity. And yes, people will leave. But they're not leaving you. They're leaving the role you stopped playing. The one that made their life easier while making yours smaller. Let them. Because the ones who remain, the ones who show up when you're messy, when you're honest, when you're real, those are the ones you were always looking for. You begin to feel it when you're socializing, and you come home drained instead of filled. When you hesitate before every reply, afraid to offend. When you say yes, but resent it the whole time. When you feel invisible, even around people who claim to love you. These are signs, not of weakness, but of a mask that's worn too long, too tightly, too completely. But the moment you see it, you're no longer trapped by it. You don't need permission to take it off. You don't need validation to start telling the truth. You just need the courage to show up, unpolished, unfiltered, unapologetically whole. Because the ones who love you then, they won't love the mask. They'll love you. You don't need a new personality. You need courage. The kind that lets you pause before saying yes. The kind that lets people feel disappointed without letting it break you. The kind that turns your back on approval and walks straight into the fire of truth. Carl Jung never said you had to become harsh or cold to protect yourself. What he wanted was something far deeper. For you to become so rooted in your own truth that no one could twist you out of shape again. And now, something is stirring inside you. You feel it, don't you? A quiet unraveling. You're starting to notice how much of your life has been a performance. How much of your identity was stitched together by other people's comfort. You're realizing that behind every polite yes was a buried no. And maybe for the first time in your life, you're asking the one question that terrifies and liberates all at once. Who am I when I stop pleasing? That's not a surface-level shift. That's not just tweaking your habits or setting new routines. This is a collapse and rebuild. This is the death of who you were trained to be, and the birth of someone raw, real, and whole. Jung knew that when you stop living for others, it's not just comfort that disappears, it's your former self. But what rises in its place isn't bitter. It's someone honest. Someone who doesn't need applause to feel peace. Someone who can say no without guilt and yes without fear. At first, the guilt will come. It'll show up in your throat, in your stomach, in the silence after you disappoint someone. You'll think you've done something wrong. But that isn't guilt. That's withdrawal. You're coming off a lifetime of needing approval like oxygen. Of course it hurts. But that ache, that's the first sign of power returning. Let it hurt. Let it echo. And still, do the right thing anyway. That's how the shift begins. Not in perfection, but in presence. You've been taught that your worth is tied to how helpful, how likable, how agreeable you are. If you're needed, you matter. If you're liked, you're safe. But that isn't value. That's performance, and that's survival. True value, it's in the boundaries you protect and in the truth you refuse to dilute, in the version of you that doesn't bend just to be palatable. You're not here to be useful. You're here to be whole. And yes, people will be disappointed. Let them be. You can disappoint someone and still be kind, still be good, still be worthy. You don't owe anyone an apology for honoring yourself. Every time you soften your boundary to cushion someone else's feelings, you send yourself a quiet message. Your needs are a threat. They're not. They're sacred. Being misunderstood without losing your center, that's where your shadow begins to integrate. That's where you stop shape-shifting and start standing still. You don't need to make a big announcement. You don't need to prove how different you are. Just start small. Take your time. Don't rush to answer. Don't explain every number. Don't apologize for things that don't require fixing. Let your silence speak. Let your consistency train the world. Slowly, people adjust. They stop assuming, they stop pushing, because they can feel it. The quiet boundary of someone who's no longer trying to be liked, but finally becoming real. And as you step into that, your world changes. The people who only loved your compliance will fade. Let them. That was never love. That was dependency dressed in affection. In their place come those who don't need you to shrink to connect. People who meet your honesty with their own. People who don't love your mask. They love your essence. But you only attract those people when you hold the line. Not once, not when it's convenient, but every single time that old urge to shrink returns. Feel it, breathe through it, and hold firm. Each time you choose truth over comfort, you become less shakeable. Not louder, not harsher, just more clear, more anchored. And that, Jung would say, is the point. Not to be admired, not to be liked, but to become whole. That's the transformation that matters. Not external success, but internal alignment. Not applause, but integrity. You're not walking away from kindness. You're walking toward consciousness. This isn't about becoming cold. This is about finally waking up. Waking up from the trance of performance. Waking up from the belief that your worth is up for negotiation. Waking up from the need to bleed for people who wouldn't even notice if you disappeared. Now, you don't need to be everything for everyone. You just need to be true to yourself. Even if it's uncomfortable. Even if it's lonely. Even if it's misunderstood. Because those who are truly free aren't always liked. But they're always real.